There's a lot happening in LA right now in the ongoing dialogue with their teachers, and I thought maybe what we could do is read this piece by Doug Smith, which is called "Here's What Happened in the Last Two LAUSD Teachers' Strikes in 1970 and in 1989" by Doug Smith. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on there now. It looks very interesting in LA right now. Raining, and teachers and students and Democrats, left-leaning artists out in the streets protesting for their teachers' jobs. Yo, Ruben, what's up? It's raining in LA, and we're talking about the teachers' strike. There's a strike of all the teachers in LA. They lost $15 million on strike day one. Students are protesting, and it's raining in LA, which never happens really. It's rare anyway. And there's an article here by a guy named Doug Smith. It's called "What Happened in the Last Two LAUSD Teacher Strikes." This is 1970 and 89. It's a historical look at when this stuff bubbles up. And if you look at it, between 70 and 89, that's 19 years. And the last strike ended in 92, so that's 20. Like basically every 20 years, you're having a strike in the Los Angeles Unified School District. So here we go. As the strike fever built, Los Angeles teachers assembled at Hamilton High School and solemnly placed a casket into a hearse. The funeral cortege then headed to LAX with a message for Sacramento: public education is dead. That was an epilogue to the last strike by LA teachers nearly 30 years ago, as the gains won were slipping away. Today, teachers are once again on the brink of a walkout. This was a few days ago. It's already happened. They have now walked out, saying public education is in peril. If the strike takes place Monday as planned, it did take place yesterday as planned, it would be the third in the 5-decade history of the United Teachers of Los Angeles. The earlier strikes in 1970 and 89 brought turmoil to the school system and angst to the city as students languished at schools with light supervision, played hooky, or demonstrated while union and district officials wrangled in court and in the media for the upper hand. The threatened walkout could do the same. And again, we are in day 2 of the walkout right now. This piece is from last week. As in past strikes, the pay dispute is compounded by deeper battles over the stature of teachers and the funding of public education. The district has offered teachers a 6% raise spread over the first 2 years of a 3-year contract. The union wants an immediate 6.5% raise, retroactive to a year earlier. Teachers have rejected the district's limited offer to reduce class size and add more support staff, and are demanding the reversal of years of cutbacks to fully staff schools. The union's rhetoric reflects a theme of teacher empowerment that has been at the center of the school district's labor struggles going all the way back to 1970, when UTLA members were off the job for nearly 5 weeks. The lasting effects of the earlier strikes have been mixed. Teachers and their union gained stature after both strikes, but the underlying goal of solidifying the funding of public education has proved elusive. The open question is, why in terms of money are not the two parties holding hands and getting on the plane to Sacramento, said Charles Kirchner, a labor relations historian and professor emeritus at Claremont Graduate University. The paymaster here is the state. He wondered whether a strike might undermine any effort to amend California tax law in ways that would allow LAUSD to, quote, move up from the bottom 10 places in the country in terms of school funding, close quote. That, by the way, is a fact. It's in the bottom of in the whole country in terms of funding, and it has a huge city in its district. I mean, it's one of the most densely populated districts in America. The same question infused the previous strikes. In 1970, teachers won a 5% pay raise along with smaller classes and the creation of advisory councils, on which they would share power with administrators. Gains hailed as a watershed at the time. Don Baer, UTLA's then executive director, said at that time, quote, "We have turned the school administrative system upside down, and teachers for the first time have achieved a dignity for themselves because they now speak to administrators as equals." Close quote. But others cried sellout because the walkout failed to wring new funds from Sacramento, where Governor Ronald Reagan remained unsympathetic. The Times quoted a disgruntled teacher anonymously, quote, "We should have stayed out on strike until Governor Reagan and the legislature were forced to realize that education in California is a top priority problem," close quote. The union victory was further compromised when a court found that California law did not authorize school districts to engage in collective bargaining, and it nullified the contract. But the strike's impact was felt years later, in 1975, when the legislature approved the RADA Act, establishing collective bargaining for teachers. Bill Lambert, a UTLA co-founder, said, quote, "That was my bill to protect the teachers and to give them a voice and make sure the students that the teachers taught were listened to. So the winners of the strike have to be the students." The district's funding problems grew worse as Proposition 13, the 1978 property tax reduction measure, cut into the primary source of local school funding. Yet another problem to be laid at the feet of Proposition 13, by the way. Proposition 98, a teacher-backed initiative approved by voters a decade later, set minimum levels of state funding. But the measure turned out to be a ceiling, not a floor, said Wayne Johnson, the fiery UTLA president who launched the 1989 strike. Quote, "Education, unfortunately, has deteriorated to a terrible level in this city, a badly underfinanced school system that suffers from a 40% dropout rate, overcrowded classrooms, and shortages of school books and other supplies." The 1989 strike proved to be another contest for public opinion. In the run-up, the union provoked student protests by announcing that teachers would not file grades with the district. The district and then Superintendent Leonard Britton overreacted by docking the pay of teachers who boycotted unpaid duties such as playground supervision and after-school meetings. Johnson successfully used media coverage to portray the union as the underdog. Britton was a respected administrator who was sympathetic to the teachers' goal of shared decision-making, but he did not understand that the politics of the district, quote, "was no longer that of an all-powerful superintendent who was a benefactor of a comparatively weak teachers union," close quote. That's researcher Stephanie Clayton in a 2008 analysis of the strike for Claremont University. Demonstrations by teachers and students, some degenerating into rock throwing by students, helped turn the tide toward the teachers. The 1989 victory, like its precursor 19 years earlier, proved fragile. As the recession of the early 1990s plunged LAUSD into the red, teachers faced a 10% pay cut at the end of the contract. So every gain that seems to come from one of these situations is not enduring, and it certainly is not building on improving this extremely massive and out of control school district. A more far-reaching gain involved district politics. Elections shortly after the strike seated a union-friendly majority on the school board that added agency fees to the contract, allowing UTLA to collect dues from all teachers until the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the practice in 2008. UTLA got enough money that they bought their headquarters on Wilshire Boulevard, Johnson said, and the teacher engagement didn't prove as big a hit as Johnson had hoped. David Tarkovsky, a young teacher who walked the picket line in 1989 and later served 3 terms on the Board of Education, looks back on his time on school-based management committees as a waste. Quote, "I could have been earning a master's degree and I sat there arguing over small amounts of money. What was disappointing to me as a young teacher in 1989 is the class size thing just melted away compared to the salary thing." Close quote. Though 3 decades separate that strike from the current one, the underlying grievances and the hostile rhetoric surrounding them have hardly changed. Quote, "Desperate, despicable people" was Johnson's epithet for district officials when he told 7,000 teachers at a sports arena rally, quote, "They are lying, they are lying, they are lying," close quote. Alex Caputo Pearl, the current UTLA president, has called Austin Buettner, a businessman who had no experience in social administration before being named superintendent of LAUSD, an out-of-touch millionaire with, quote, "an agenda to dismantle the district," close quote. Hardball tactics took all 3 labor disputes into court. Teachers in 1970 ignored a Superior Court order declaring their strike illegal, ultimately resulting in $12,000 in fines for the union and 5 of its officers. The union went to court in 1989 unsuccessfully seeking an order to prevent Britain from withholding pay from teachers who refused to turn in grades. In the current dispute, the district asked a court, also unsuccessfully, seeking to require special education teachers to continue working during a strike, and the union went to court over the strike start date. But Kirshner, the Claremont Graduate University historian, sees the background themes of past strikes as greatly magnified today because of changes in the city of Los Angeles itself, no longer a mecca for socially engaged corporate leadership, and the emergence of charter schools. Kirchner said, calling it a contest between, quote, two prophets preaching opposite visions, quote, this is a strike about the soul of public education. On the one hand, Caputo Pearl, quote, has a very clear idea of what he thinks schools in Los Angeles should look like, community schools with wraparound services, close quote. Buettner, he said, has been, quote, manifestly unclear about his plan, but given who supported him, making a safe haven for charter schools is much more in his wheelhouse, close quote. For Tarkovsky, this debate pits an unrealistic idealist against an unseasoned ideologue, with a, quote, lack of reality on both sides. There is a lot of anger here that feels different, Tarkovsky said. Johnson also sees the current situation as fundamentally different from the 1989 strike he led. Quote, UTLA keeps saying publicly, it's not about the money. With us, it was almost 90% about the money. Teachers got an immediate bump of 16% with another 8% the following year, he said. The 1993 pay cut clawed back about half of the gain. Johnson has no regrets. Quote, I want that on my tombstone, he said. So that is a little history on what is going on. And here we are in day 2 of the Los Angeles Unified School District's strike. There are people, students and teachers, lining up around schools, picketing in the rain. Los Angeles School Superintendent, this is now today's news. School Superintendent Austin Buettner said the first day of the teachers' strike hit hard. Only a third of the district's students showed up, which he said would cost the district $25 million in state funding based on attendance. Subtract unpaid wages for the strikers of $10 million, he said, and that amounts to an estimated one-day $15 million loss. He said the teachers' union and its 31,000 members, wow, 31,000 members of the teachers' union in LA. It's a huge district. Who walked off the job should join with the district in pushing Sacramento to better fund schools. Quote, let's build on the renewed attention on public education in our community. Let's bottle it, let's put it on our buses, and let's go to Sacramento, Buettner said during a news conference Tuesday morning. The strike is United Teachers Los Angeles' first in 30 years. We said that a moment ago. Teachers are striking for better pay, smaller class sizes, and more support staff. The walkout proved to be a massive disruption for hundreds of thousands of students and their families. Skeletal staffs crammed students together to try supervising them in larger groups and struggled to keep them engaged as teachers marched outside. The vast majority of the district's parents and guardians are low income, and many grappled with choosing between missing work to watch their children or sending them to an unknown situation at school. Buettner said, quote, it's clearly having a big impact. We need our educators back in our classrooms inspiring students, close quote. Negotiations between UTLA and the nation's second largest school district broke off late Friday of last week after more than 20 months of bargaining with no resolution to the educators' demands for smaller class sizes, better pay, and more support staff. So that's the news, if you will, from LA.